I'd like to go ahead and introduce our team today. We have Mike Kappus, who's a legendary booking agent and manager and has all kinds of awards behind him. He's out of San Francisco and owns the Rosebud Agency, which you all may have heard of. We have Lou Hill, who is a New Orleans awesome musician and part of several ensembles, including Water Seed. And he also manages talent. And we have the star attorney, Bree Whetstone, who is the co-producer along with Lou of our crescendo sessions that we have hosted in the past. So I hope to do very little talking during this. These experts know way more than I will ever know about putting together a team and what that looks like for musicians. And so I am going to start with one basic question, which is whether you all would mind defining the various roles that are required of of a team of a solid team that for musicians. So ideally, what kind of roles need to be played for an established musical act to be successful, whether or not you farm those roles out or you perform the roles in house. You want to start, Mike? And
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for inviting me back to these. Uh, I've been an agent and a manager, and I think those are the first two crucial needs for an artist to building their team. The management role is the most important, I think, but it's usually not available to an artist just starting out, making the agent probably the first one to get you gigs. And the agent's job is to fill the calendar in the appropriate way, performing in the right spaces at the right times with the collaborating with other artists, ideally in a space and with other artists who are compatible, so that the audience is open to what you're doing and you're not in the wrong space. You're not an acoustic guitarist playing in a hard rock club or with a hard rock band. Um, anyway, the manager I think of as the artist's funnel to the rest of the world. It's a key role. And again, it's hard to find good managers, but the artist communicates with the manager about what their needs are, what their goals are, and the manager goes out and tries to fulfill those goals, I feel. And that's everything else, really. And then the manager goes out and researches all the different opportunities and possible collaborators and brings all the information back to the artist, in my experience at least, and gives the artist the opportunities and the options to make their choices. Now, there's different types of managers. There's managers that put together a boy band or something like that, and they do everything. They hire a choreographer and get songs and tell the artist or pick the bands rather than bands that organically come together. They might pick everything. So that's one extreme with the manager really doing so much. But the other extreme is people like Bonnie Raitt and Carlos Santana and the Rolling Stones who have a tremendous amount of experience, and they can tell their managers what they want to do. They know the business inside out, and so there's much more in the artist's hands. But and the manager, uh, there should be conversations beforehand. And I've actually, back to our agent, when an artist is seeking an agent, I always recommend that if they're playing out and being successful in certain venues or with certain promoters, ask that promoter who might be a good agent. That promoter is probably or talent by our club owner or whatever, is probably in touch with more agents and managers than anybody else. And if this artist has been doing well in their venue, they ideally can come up with some good ideas of pairing them with a manager and agent. So that's one important thing, I think. Anyway, the manager ideally has great experience. You don't just try to find an agent or a manager and think the job is over. I mean, it's you've got to. And one thing I would recommend right offhand, and I'll shut up in a minute, but you don't necessarily go for the biggest, most successful artist or agent or manager. I've seen so many situations with artists going with a major agency or a renowned manager who ends up not having the time or the enthusiasm to work with this young artist that doesn't bring in that much money. So you need somebody who's got the necessary experience or can learn it fast, but also has the time to focus on your needs. So
Thank
I
you.
guess
Thank you.
that I can leave it at that for the moment, I
Well,
think.
I think we'll get more into that, into the
Yeah.
selection process and the matching process down the
Yeah.
line. But and I know that you've identified the manager and agent, and of course those are very, very, very important roles in building your team. But going back to the when you mentioned choreography, I thought, Lou, you could speak to the team that you need for actually generating the content, right? The songwriters and the recording team that you need to make these records, right?
Right. So the it's a very hard puzzle to put together. I love the idea of starting with an agent. That's what we kind of started with. We started with a PR person who was into the group enough that she was literally booking gigs for us and getting us appearances and doing a lot of stuff, and that changed our career. She's technically PR, but I would call her an agent. I just wouldn't tell it to her face because she'd be like, "No, I'm PR," but I thought of her more of it as an agent. In today's market, there's so many other moving parts. I have to stress that artists, most of it is on you first. There's a huge amount of work that you have to do. There's no magical person that you're going to get to come in and do the work because the industry is so fast right now. So if you're in when it comes to choreographer or social media specialist or booking agent, that depends on your genre, the type of music you're promoting, and everything. You need to study artists that are similar to you. And I say this a lot and reverse engineer what you think they did. And you need to figure out your first steps. Is a step by step game in an industry, again, that changes every 3 to 6 months. So you have to really keep your head on a swivel. And when you're building out your team, know what you want to accomplish right now, and then know what you want to accomplish 6 months from now and figure out how you're going to get there. But it's that first small step. So again, if you're a rap artist, maybe the biggest thing that you're looking for is a producer, and I wouldn't pay for a producer, go find a friend, figure it out, do something like that. It's always the new thing everybody's talking about is parallel negotiations, like people that are around you in your circle, build with those people around you, opposed to always trying to leap forward. I've been on that booking agent, whereas, agency, where it's like, they really don't pay a lot of attention to you because they're not making a lot of money just yet from you. And there is almost no artist development anymore, where agents say this guy's going to be big, we're going to make them special. So you want to build in your space as much as you can. So I say this a lot too. You always want to look in the mirror and figure out what you need, what you would like to accomplish, and you need to take on that challenge and do that first. So I guess before I wrap this part up, is like, what do you start with? What do you need on your team? There's so many team players, from PR to social media to wardrobe to management to booking to all of these different things that are potentially out there. You have to figure out what are your needs right now, and then what pieces are you going to apply to help you get to that next level.
So Lou, and thank you for that answer, but I'm still curious. So with Waterseed, who writes your songs? Or do you, I mean, I know you don't do all covers, and I know most of your songs are original.
So I write about 95% of the music, but that's that's super artistic, I guess, and that goes back to the part that's really automatic for me. I don't know if that's automatic for other people, but I spent a lot of years studying and honing my craft, and every day I work on it. So there's no time that I'm not working on the art and really trying to be a better musician. But that's something personally that I took on, to say I want to be the songwriter and the producer and understand music and write and play and all the rest of that now. So uh, that's I know a lot of artists that don't know anything about the theory and how music works, and
Right.
they're successful, which is just the way the industry is right now. So,
You use a producer because a producer would certainly be part of your team, right?
So a producer would be. So I do write most of the music, but I do, when someone has music that I think is really cool, I do put it on the table and say, hey, maybe I can use that. But I do have ears around me all the time. I'm not writing or producing from a siloed situation.
Mm-hmm.
I do have an engineer that's really hands-on. I have two other band members that are hands-on, and I have trusted friends from around the world that I'll be like, hey man, listen to this. What are you hearing? And they'll give advice. So I do have a circle of people that, I can always collaborating with in some kind of form or fashion. I love to collaborate. So I'm always sending stuff out. Like, what do you think? What do you hear? And that kind of vibe. So yeah.
And what about the recording studio? Do you have just like one recording studio that you use, or do you record in-house? Or, I mean,
No, so right now this is like I'm in my little recording room where I do most of my initial demos.
Mhm.
And so I do a lot of my work here. Then I take it to a much larger studio that I invite people over to because I don't like everybody in my house. So I invite people over to if I need some extra parts, if I need input, if I need to re-record something, whatever I need to do, I take it to the other studio. I master and mix at the other studio and everything like that. So that's my situation. And I know a lot of artists don't have access to studio spaces. You know, the new mini Macs are what, $500? Get that in the TV, and you can get going for $1,500. So that's not a promo for Mac, but just saying you can get going for $1,500. Is great to have something in your own space where you can just 3 o'clock in the morning get an idea out. You know.
Right. Well, and we were mentioning, I mentioned Water Seed, and that's obviously, an established band. But if you're not a solo performer, then, and you're creating an ensemble, whether you have someone like Mike was talking about, a manager who's, pre-selecting like the boy band, right? Or, you're looking to collaborate with others on performances, or maybe you're an ensemble that has different configurations. What do you look for in building your performance team? Because that's very relevant, especially for folks like Mike, who are booking agents looking at the performers and the performances when
My,
they're determining whether to put them on the roster.
so you mean the people on the stage or the people backstage helping?
Both.
So the people on a stage, there's a really hard requirement inside of Water Seed, in that we've always felt like we should compete on a very international level. So that means that when you come in, it's not about just your ability to play, though that's very important. But somebody said that, it's not the 10% of the time we spend on stage that I need to get along with you with, is the 90% that we're not on stage we need to get along. So I look for like-minded people, and I love a variety of personalities, but you have to be serious about it, because we're going to put you in costume. We're going to give you dance moves. We're going to do all of this stuff that normally doesn't happen in the New Orleans market, but it's what we do. Our rehearsals are run very tight. In other words, they get the music weeks in advance, and we're not practicing songs in rehearsal. We're practicing performances, and that's a standard that we have, just because I don't want to waste people's time and they don't want their time. But the bass player doesn't want to wait for the drummer to figure out what they're supposed to play. So we're there to work and to make sure we put on a great show. Behind the scene is always very tricky because, again, we're self-run, which is not by design. It's something that is just a happenstance. But at very least, we have somebody at our merch table, which helps if we're doing a larger show that has several artists on it, and is our immersive show Journey to Funk Star. Our back, we have at least 8 people working behind the scenes, everybody from making sure the dressing room is fine, to getting artists to the stage, to speaking to the audience as a host, to running merch tables, to doing sound, doing tech, all the rest of that stuff. That's when you really start getting, when you bring it in your own LD, your own sound guy, your own everything, to really make sure your show is amazing. So we've gone from as small as one person to up to 8 to 10 people, depending on the show. So it just depends on the production. And that comes with relationships. We've built a long lasting relationship with our sound guy. I have a few lighting directors that understand what I want. And even if people backstage, everybody that really works with me tightly knows I really don't want to know what's going on. I just want to know that it's getting done right. The day of show, do not come to me talking to me about any this, that, no. Do the job, make sure nothing goes wrong, and that's my requirement because I need to be in artist mode, and that doesn't mean running around popping bottles. That means I need to mentally be in a place where I'm ready to put on a show and do amazing things that makes me feel good. So again, that takes time though. I would say this: if you're a new artist and you're just starting, you have to get your reps in. You have to create that identity on stage, and you have to have people that are honest around you, that are going to give you real critiques, and not get people around you that are just like, oh, it was great. It was nope. You need honest people to get better. And so that's another part. Your friends and families are great, but I never market to my family, and I very seldomly market to my good friends. And that's just because they're going to love me no matter what. So there it goes. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So Lou, when both Mike and Lou were speaking for the audience, all I could, my head is just swimming with the number of contracts that are needed to enforce the getting serious, to making sure that all these obligations are fulfilled. Bree, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So like Ashlye mentioned in the introduction, I'm a local attorney. I'm currently a litigator, but I've done a bunch of entertainment and intellectual property work over the years. This is a tricky question because yes, there are a ton of contracts involved. However, lawyers are very, very expensive. There are also very, very few entertainment attorneys in the city of New Orleans or the state of Louisiana that I would trust. So what you really need to do is Lou and I talk about this a lot at Crescendo, you still need to have some level of understanding yourself. You need to understand how to do your own copyright applications so that you can do them for under $100 as opposed to getting a law firm that's going to charge you $400. You need to understand the difference between a state trademark and a federal trademark when it comes to your brand name or your identity. Because if you just can do an $80 state trademark, great. If you want to do a federal trademark, that's $225 per class. You do need an attorney for that. So a lot of times when we have our Crescendo workshops, people come up to me later and they're like, hey, I want to retain you as an attorney. And my first question is, for what? Because if you don't actually have a contract that needs to be negotiated already, you don't really need me. I'm not a manager. I'm not an agent. I'm not really here to shape your career or to really give you recommendations on what to do as a musician. I'm here to help guide you through the legal aspects so that you protect yourself. So teaching yourself about, and there's tons of blogs out there that can at least give you the baseline of what a co-authorship agreement is. If Lou and I write a song together, we're going to both own that copyright together. And so if I want to just buy his music and use my lyrics, there's a way to do that through contract. So what you need to do is understand the basics of the industry, where you are and what you're doing, so that then contracts don't have to be 18 pages, single spaced and legalese with heretofore, whereas contracts can be really simple. But everything does need to be in writing so that it's clear, because once something goes wrong, everybody's memory gets really fuzzy. So going to the Ella Project and using their pro bono legal clinic is a great way to have your contracts reviewed or to have them help you draft contracts. But to call me up is going to be very, very expensive, and I'm on the cheap end in this city. So you really have to take some level of accountability to know, hey, this is something I can do myself versus, hold up, this is a contract from an actual studio, or things are getting a little dicey. now I need to go to an attorney and consult and get their advice on how to address that. But the lawyer is not the first person on your team. One thing that's also a good idea that Ella can also help with, because I did it when I was a student volunteer, is if you have a musical group like Water Seed, where there are multiple individuals all in the group, you can go and have them help draft the operating agreement for your band, which can include different things like what is the requirement for the rehearsal schedule? What is the requirement for, like, the James Brown clause? What if you're late? You can put those things in so that you're laying out the expectations of different members of the band. You can also say, okay, well, Lou can spend up to $250 without needing the entire band's approval, or set it for whatever. So that then you understand what the band owns versus what the individuals own. That's a good place to start, but the attorney is not usually the first person you call.
That said, how important is it for collaborators, for songwriters who are working together, and for people who are recording together, to document their ownership interests, so that when they approach someone like Mike, he knows that he can take them on without exposure?
Having that documented is vital, because if you go into where you're both creating one song, if Lou writes the music and I write the lyrics, and we are intending to merge our talents into one piece of art, this one song, we both own 100% of the copyright. Lou can do whatever he wants to do with that song as long as he pays me my half. I can do whatever I want to do with the song. If you say that you're a gospel group, say one of you is very religious and the other one isn't, one of the things you would want to have a conversation about is like what kind of limits that you would want for licensing. Because if somebody's really religious, they're not going to want to license the song for an alcohol commercial or a sex scene in a movie. If you lay all of these things out in the beginning, then you're able to protect yourself and also protect the work the way you want to. But once you've made that song together, I always say you've made a baby, and y'all both are going to be stuck with that baby for the rest of your lives. That's how copyright works. And you're stuck with each other too. So you don't want to get into collaborations or even producer relationships without laying out the expectations. And again, you can put this in an email. It doesn't have to be extensive, but just laying out each person's obligations, responsibilities, ownership interest. Because if Lou comes in and he only writes one verse, but we don't have this documented, he might come back, say that the song becomes a hit. He might come back and say, no, I wrote everything. And if we haven't documented that, it's going to be really expensive to prove Lou only wrote that one verse. Even if Lou and I both know he only wrote one verse, if he's telling me, everybody's memories get really fuzzy. So having that all documented early on during the process, we talk a lot about, oh, Lou, help me out, because I'm thinking cue sheets, but that's a movie thing.
Split sheet.
Thank you. Split sheets. So like we talked about, like while you're writing songs or while you're in the studio, be doing your split sheets so that it says Bree, 75% lyrics, Lou, 25% lyrics, Lou, 100% music. So that then in 5 years, there's no question.
Right. And Mike, I know that you can speak to this. You've had several anecdotes on the importance of your performers and your artists having all the legal protections they need, and the impact that these negotiations can have on their opportunity to earn and to maximize their leverage.
Sorry, is there a question there?
Yes, you and I have talked about the importance of musicians having the legal team around them, and what happens when they don't, when it comes to their ownership interests, and when it comes to their bookability. So, if a band doesn't have some sort of agreement that requires, each member to show up on stage, that subjects you to liability.
I've actually never had a situation, and I've managed artists where there's different things defined as far as, like I've had artists cover health insurance and things like that for band members, but I've never in like 50 years and God knows how many artists come into a situation where it was laid out in writing about rehearsals and things of that nature. That's just kind of understood amongst the players, and they're ideally all professional, or if they're not in the band long, maybe. But yeah, the as far as contracts, I had J.J. Cale wrote songs that were covered by a whole lot of people, and Eric Clapton in particular. Two of his biggest hits, After Midnight and Cocaine, were written by J.J. Cale, and that really launched J.J. Cale's career, and he's super grateful to Eric for that. So later on, Eric asked Cale to produce him, and he wasn't sure about doing it first because he wasn't sure, if he did something drastically different, would he be held responsible for this down spot in Eric's career? So he finally agreed to do it, but he said, everything Eric's done for my career, I don't want any money. I don't want, anything. It doesn't matter. I'll just do everything for free. And I said, that's fine for the two of you, but down the road somewhere, there's going to be an heir on one side or the other saying, wait a second, how much is he getting here? They should be getting more or less or whatever. So you've got to document it regardless of how close the relationship might be between the parties. Because as Bree said, not only do memories get fuzzy, but you can be dealing with people, heirs further on down the road who have had no discussions whatsoever about this. Somebody died, and what do we do about this? So yeah, it's crucial to have everything in writing and documented. And I did that myself with Cale, who just hated business, and he hated long contracts. So I got the record companies to do as short a contract as possible. We also, here's a side point actually, there's if you don't know the party involved and you've got the ability to make a contract shorter, then you do it, and you can always renew it if everything is going well. But we did a 2-album deal with a record company in England, and the person who made the deal with was very, very cooperative, very good collaboration. Then he left the company after album 1, and then we were stuck with no cheerleader in the company, just nobody who really sincerely cared about the artist, and we're stuck there for another album. So after that point, I made nothing but 1-album deals after that, so that if somebody took off, we're not tied to them forever. And I think it's really crucial, especially in a record company, a larger record company in particular, but also in a booking agency, to have at least one real cheerleader, one person who's really sincerely behind the artist, to make sure that the rest of their company doesn't just forget about them and move on to the next project, which I also had that situation with an artist who was very successful, but they had a number of other very successful artists, and without some cheerleaders inside the company, they can just move on to the next project.
Well, and I like that you're speaking to the attributes that you're looking for in some of these roles that people are playing. And I see that Bree has her hand up. What you got, Bree?
And one thing that you can do, and a lawyer can help you with this, if there is one person you want to work with. If I want to work with Lou Hill, or he wants to work with Bree Whetstone, not somebody else in my law firm, it's called a key man clause, and you just put that in the contract so that then you don't get pushed off to the underlings. That the Foo Fighters had one, or maybe it was Nirvana had one. It was Nirvana had one, and so that then when their label made a bunch of changes, they were able to get out of their deal because they were able to rely on that key man clause, that it's about the person, not about WME, not about the agency, not about the management company. It's about that relationship with that specific person.
Yeah, these relationships are very important. And Mike, you were starting to talk about that. And I think that, when you're looking at developing your team, how important is it that all of these roles that we're talking about, again, whether, you know, you're farming these roles out or you're doing them in-house, like Lou is doing a lot of right now, how important is it that your team is tight, that they communicate with each other effectively?
Oh, absolutely. And I've used this example in some of the other things we did, but I represented a singer-songwriter who, with the right little turns of luck, could have been a James Taylor. He was a great songwriter, a great singer, great stage presence, and he was signed by probably the most powerful business person in the music business at the time. This is 70s, late 70s. This guy managed Bob Dylan, Frank Sinatra, and John Denver, who John Denver had 12 television specials of his own, that this guy coordinated. He also coordinated US or nationwide tours for Three Dog Night, who was popular at the time, but also Led Zeppelin and Cream. So he's so powerful.
Small
He's done,
clients, small time, right?
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you talk about impressive. But my friend signed with him, actually, a guy that I booked, and got absolutely nothing because he wasn't, the guy was doing all this other big time stuff. And I don't think he even saw a full set by this artist he's managing. Um, so big is not necessarily better. And I also had people go off to one of the biggest agencies in the world. This is before I had my own company, but they uh, they called me back 2 weeks later, and after thanking me for what I'd done. 2 weeks after going to the big agency, they called me and said, "Can you get us anything? We're like number 275 on a list of 275. This biggest agency in the country didn't get them a single job. Um, so that's why I always say there's people that are incredibly enthusiastic, a neighbor or a family member, but they don't have the experience. And then there's people who've got all the experience in the world, but they don't have the enthusiasm or the dedication or the focus to you listen to and accomplish the artist's goals. So you've got to find ideally somebody in between, but you've got to have somebody who can either open the doors or learn quickly how to open the doors, as well as somebody who really cares about the individual. Um, I would throw in a couple of things here. Just it might be important to artists. This isn't what I did with our agency as far as choosing an artist. I would think that's important for people to know what the choice is. Sometimes it's just the smell of success and big money. That was not necessarily was not my thing. But what my concerns were, does the artist move me in some way? I've got to be moved, not just that's okay, that's nice. Um, and there's got to be potential at some point for them to reach, or you feel a potential that they can at least pay their cover their costs, and ideally much more. Can't be an endless charity. And the people that you're dealing with before we take somebody on, and we were extremely choosy. We stayed small. I stayed small because of some of the reasons I just gave. And we turned down 1,000 to 1,500 artists every year and signed maybe one, maybe two, maybe none. So it was really, and so there was a more personal relationship with every artist too. But one of the key things in a personal relationship is, do we feel good about the people we're working with, or are they going to drive us crazy? And there's several who are really incredible artists that I passed on because I could see that, the artist in one case, I talked to the manager for 45 minutes and didn't get anywhere. I thought this person's going to eat up all my time and we're not going to get anything done. And one other thing is that there's realistic expectations on behalf of the artist, that they don't feel like I'm doing this, I'm so great, and I've got these great reviews and everybody loves me, I should be here. Well, where a person is at, as far as especially how much money they're making in a live performance, that's an easy one to figure out is how many people do they draw at what ticket price? That's the gross. And it varies tremendously from a bar that's just doing their regular business and brings a musician in, they have no extra costs, to a concert where you're renting sound, lights, and security and everything else. But a wild, rough figure could be half of that gross, the
Right.
artist. And if you're getting a fraction of what you can't expect to be paid the full amount that comes in or anything more than that. If you're expecting that, that's not realistic at all.
Okay, we're going to get into that more, but I want to pivot to Lou because I want same topic from an artist perspective, both as an artist perspective, and I know that you're managing a local act right now too. So, what are your thoughts on this?
First thing is you have to be careful. There's a lot of people when you're building your team who um, I like the points that were brought up. They have to be passionate about you, or else they're gonna wait. You're gonna waste your time and potentially money. So you have to have somebody that's really into what you're doing, either as a person or they love the sound or they see some way that is going to benefit them. There's so many artists that are sitting on rosters. And look, first half of my career, I was just hunting down this manager because they manage this person and that person. And sometimes you get that manager and you do less. You're
Right,
just
that's
sitting
what
there
Mike was saying, and I
doing
know you've
nothing.
done that.
Yeah, and it's horrible. So um, you have to be careful with that as artists, especially when you build your team. The best people are the people that come up to you like, I love what you're doing. How can I help? What can I do? How can we get it done? I'm fortunate enough in a phase now where a lot of people are just like, how can we help? Let's not even deal with a financial situation. We'll just come to terms on an agreements we want to work with and let's move forward. So that's been great. Um, I think it does come down to there's a huge difference between, and I talk about this as well a lot. There's a huge difference between a performing artist or gigging artist and a recording artist, and that has a lot to do with, I think, what Mike's saying. Sometimes people are just coming to listen to your music for the ambiance. I've done a lot of ambiance gigs where it's been like people are there, the band thinks they're there for you and they're not. They're there for the ambiance. And the moment you move and try to actually sell tickets, none of those people transfer to your show. And that's a huge thing that I think here locally we get caught up in. It's like, are they really coming to see you or are they just coming to hang out? Like, what's the difference? So in building your team, you need to have somebody that understands that part of it too. And as an artist, you need to be realistic about what your goals are, what your start understanding your fan base, who really loves you, who are your super fans. A lot of times we're just creating art and we don't know who is going to resonate with, and we just hope that it resonates with somebody. But a lot of times, especially nowadays with the internet, we don't know all the little details about who's doing what. Yeah, you can look at your analytics, which you should.
Tell us about that analytics though. What are the analytics? Where do you find your analytics?
So on any platform, if you go to like Insight, and it'll show you when people are looking at you, where they're located, and stuff like that. If you really want to get in depth, you go to a platform called Chart Metrics, and it'll pull in all the data from all of those sources, so you can figure out, is my demographic 25 to 35 or 55 to 65? Are they in the US or are they in, Germany? Is it New Orleans or is it Houston? Is it mostly men? Is it mostly women? So those numbers kind of help you to understand what's going on. And I don't know that that translates into live shows all the time, but at least it gives you an idea of like who's listening to your music and helps you to start narrow it down. Again, we're self-managed, so I've done a very much so a la carte kind of vibe where I have people doing different things as I kind of oversee everything. But I have a specific person, as I mentioned with our immersive show, it has a lot of space for partnerships and sponsorships and endorsements. So I have someone that's their only job, B2B, business to business. Like they have a special packet where they're talking to a Coca-Cola or a tech company like, hey, this is a great show. This is the demographic. This is everything that we should partner with you on. Without going off on a tangent too much, in today's market, artists have to really think, if you're only thinking about selling tickets, if that's the only thing you're thinking about doing, you're thinking too small. You have to think about other ways to bring in revenue because there's way too much competition for people's attention. And there's also way too much, there's too much distraction. And what's happening is the times are tight, number one, but the middle, that 50, 45, 50, $60 ticket, even $35 ticket, sometimes can be a little tight on people. So you have a great $10 to $15 ticket where people love it, but if you're trying to get in that mid area, you got to really compete and you have some great songs and have a long history of great music. So you have to start thinking about other ways to bring in revenue. Can you do a partnership with a local, I don't know, tennis shoe shop that just wants to get their shoes out and get some free advertisement? It's a win for them. They're like, I get, how many people you have? 200 people. Okay, I get to have my product in front of 200 people. I'll give you $300 or $500. So you start thinking in ways like, how can you bring in revenue? Always thinking to think about, if you're going to self-manage or be in the space and even build your team, you really have to take the artist piece of it, put it on the side and figure out, how am I going to generate revenue to keep doing what I love doing? And you have to gotta have thick skin, expect a bunch of no's, expect a bunch of nope, it'll never work. And you just it's perseverance. You have to keep going, keep working, keep working. Um, so I would just say, have people that believe in you, people that are around you. And even though the industry, again, is not generating revenue from our recorded music like it should anymore, and it's even harder to reach fans, because there's, what, last time I checked, there was like 10,000 songs every 3 days or something uploaded, some ridiculous number. There's so much static in the ethos of streaming music. You have to find something that's going to allow you to stand out, and get people to your show, opposed to like going to Netflix tonight. What are you doing that's going to make this show different from everybody else's show? Especially, I would imagine most everybody on this call is an up and coming artist. So they're working where they're trying to get ahead of the pack. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to say, come to my show. And unfortunately, I think post COVID, the fact that you're good is not enough anymore. It has to be something that's gonna make it's got to be something that is going to grab them in a new, unique way. And that's not, I'm not saying create something that's not, truly and genuinely you, but I'm saying find that part of you that nobody else has and double down on that and push that to people, and you'll find your people. You'll find your super fans and do it. It's not easy. I'm saying it like it's easy. Look, I work on it every day. I'm still learning. But you will find your people by doubling down on that kind of concept. And I feel like I went way away from building.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Mike, I know that you've stressed the importance of analytics, and last time we talked, you mentioned that you use, I think it's Pollster, right?
Polestar magazine.
Star in connection with understanding like how musical acts are performing um, in various markets. Do you want to talk about that and about how that factors into your selection process?
Well, I'm not selecting anything anymore, but
Or how
I
it did,
didn't do
excuse
that.
me.
I was looking more in the future,
Right.
present in the future than Polestar. I use it now when I'm working with nonprofits and they want to hire artists to do this or that. And I'll see Polestar publishes every week all the information that's given to them by promoters and clubs around the world, and what the ticket price was, what the capacity of the venue was, what percentage of the capacity was sold, what the overall gross is. And you can see but you also see where the venue is. So there's artists. I represented an artist from Canada one time who was like God there. I mean, I went to a restaurant with him and a couple other people associated with him, and it was like Bob Dylan had just walked in. Everybody in the restaurant is aghast. And then I book him in Philadelphia suburb, and nobody knows who he is, you know. But I suggest really that an artist on a live performance level spread their awareness as widely as possible. You don't know, if you're playing Louisiana only, you've got a certain number of people coming out to see your shows, but you don't know how popular you might be in Europe, you know. for my business, I worked with roots artists who, and especially in radio in America is heavily, and probably still is, heavily polluted by how much money is paid to radio promotion people to get music on the radio. In Europe, you've got the BBC that doesn't take that money. That you've got people, Canal Plus in France, and you've got a government subsidized radio and TV in Italy, places like that. And I feel it's more of a level playing ground that's not polluted by money, but it's more people choosing the best music. So our artists, being blues and jazz and folk and gospel, did much better in Europe. But if you never went there, you wouldn't know that, you know. But J.J. Cale, for instance, uh, drew about 1,000 people in New York City, but in London, sold out 10,000 seats in advance, and then there's no more seats to sell. He could have continued to sell more seats. You know, it's that drastic a difference, and in the money, of course, as well. So anyway, a couple other points I wanted to make is for people not to be shy about asking questions of a potential partner, like a manager and agent. Looking back on my career, I regret not asking a lot more questions in different situations to really know in advance before you work with somebody, or if there's any wrinkle in the relationship, ask questions, try to work it out, you know, rather than just going with a problem going unresolved. Um, and also to learn as much as they possibly can about every aspect of the industry. It can come in handy regardless of what it is. And then you have an understanding. I think a lot of the time a problem arises when you're dealing with an artist who comes home and complains about this or that, and a family member is representative, and so they go out to crusade to change things and either fire the person or you know, come in with not an understanding of the circumstances. And agents and managers and lawyers to a degree too have some bad reputation from problems over the past, and there's been a million of them. But I think the more a person knows, the more they know what they need, but also that they're getting a good deal. I call it the offensive defense when somebody is trying to so hard to defend themselves from being taken advantage of that they become the offending party actually by being hard to work with. So I think the more you know, the better you can steer your career. So just learn everything you can, and you learn by asking questions and not to be shy about it, especially when there's any kind of doubt. You know, ask the questions, find out that your doubt is correct. Maybe you should separate from the person, or that there's good reason for what's going on, why you're not getting this money or this opportunity. So just a couple of points I really wanted to make.
Thank you. Well, you know, I always say, I don't always say, but often say that last thing I want to do as a lawyer is kill a good deal, right? Bree, I'm sure you can speak to that, how, you know, from a legal perspective, what your role might be in ensuring that, working in the entertainment sector, it's obviously very different from the insurance business, right? And you have to really not only know your craft, but know how to manage relationships.
Right. So, Louisiana and the music industry as a whole is a very small network of people. And so everybody knows everybody. And if you have a bad attitude or you have snapped back at somebody, they will tell everyone else. So you don't necessarily get a second bite of that apple. Your reputation is really important because, especially, for managers, agents, attorneys, they don't have to work with you. It's a you're choosing each other kind of situation. And I have turned down work with people that I knew would be unnecessarily difficult because I don't have time to babysit. Part of my job as an attorney is to babysit, to talk through everything, to hold people's hands, to remind them to take the emotion out of it. As the attorney, I don't actually have to like your music. It's not going to affect whether or not I'm a good attorney for you. It helps. It's better for both sides if we do, but I'm just here to do the law side. And so as an attorney, when you do have a difficult client, you want to push them as much out of the picture as possible. But then that means that that's more work on my end. So, but then if people are going around you, you're just going to end up with a bad reputation. You know, part of as an attorney working with musicians, it can get dicey. If I'm representing a band, I represent the band. I don't represent the individuals in the band. I can sit down with them, I can mediate between them to work out their differences, but I can't sue one member for another member because my loyalty is to the band as a whole. There are times where bands are falling apart and then the individual members have to get individual attorneys. There's, you know, a well-known band in New Orleans, and the band is represented by a different entertainment attorney, and then I represent one of the members for their side projects, or if there is a dispute with the band. So it gets really complicated, and the attorneys are supposed to help you work through your feelings, but it's like Lou said, you got to take the artist out of your mind at some point and just focus on the business.
Let's talk about preparing for these relationships because I know that that's really important. When do you know that you're ready for a booking agent or that you're ready for a manager? What does it, at what point in your career? I mean, is there a magic like line in the sand when you know that it's time for representation?
If I can step in, I kind of feel like you need to attract those things to you, you know. And I've been on both sides of it, like I said, where I've pushed it, but the best ones have always been I've attracted the people to me to do it. So for again, I think it goes back to the artist. The artist needs to be focused on what's immediately in front of them: your music, your shows, building your people, building your fan base, building people that are going to support you, maybe even going on the road in your region without management. I'm also pro McDonald's kind of vibe where it's like, you know, you have to know the owner of McDonald's has to know how to do the fries. So how do you know if your manager or booking agent is doing a good job if you've never done it before? You don't know the language. You don't know what it feels like. So I'm very much so like it depends on your situation, and I feel like a lot of artists push it and say, "I need a manager. I need a manager. I need a manager." Well, what are they managing? What are you? What are they? What's happening that you can't deal with yourself? You know, what's going on that you cannot deal with yourself? If you're at a point where you're getting so many calls, so many shows, everything's happening, yes, you need somebody to step in and help with that. Or if you feel that maybe you have had a great deal of success and you feel you're tapped out in the market and you need a manager to come in to help and to use their connections and the people that they know to get you further along the way to your goal, then I think that's a good time to do it as well. You're doing great in markets. Or for example, there are a lot of ways to not sign on. I'll speak specifically to booking agent. Look, I work with a lot of different agents, and you know, it's like I need a gig in Canada. Okay, I'm going to call 3 people. We're touring at this point in time. This is our stuff. Do you have anyone? And they all hit me back like, these are some offers we have. Blah 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 blah. And one of them came through with a pretty good offer. Okay, we'll take that show, and everybody understands that's what's going on. It's not ideal, but it's what was needed at the time. So I would say if you're getting overwhelmed, if things are going to, or and you're at a level of success where you just cannot keep up with it, that's a good time. If or if you're at a point where you're keeping up with it, but you're maxed out on your connections, you're maxed out on you've hit a ceiling, that's another great time to do it. But know that managers are going to look at it and say, is it going to be worth my time? You know, time is the one resource we can't get back. So it's like, is it going to be worth my time to take this on, or is it going to be too much work for me to get any return on this person? And to Bree's point as well, if you have a bad attitude, that's even worse. No one wants to work with anybody that has a bad attitude. And the last thing I'll say, if you've been doing it for a while by yourself, you have to back up and let the person that is interested in you, if you've vetted them and done everything, let them do their job. Okay, yeah, you can always call that club that you always booked at, but this person is now your booking agents. Back up, let them deal with it in a way that and it's scary because you're like, I could have got this deal done in 3 seconds. Let them back up. I'll tell you right now, and Bree brings this up every year. People who are not talking to the artists have a different idea of who they're talking to when they're not talking to the artist. And I've told this still on Facebook. I created this fictional guy called Jeff Savage on Facebook. And that's what I use for a long time to talk to people. I've signed record deals where literally the owner of the record label said, I do not want to talk to the artist. I only want to talk to their representation, because there's a stigmatism around business people talking to artists and being like, they're going to be all over the place. They're not going to get anything done. It's going to be crazy. And so they feel more comfortable talking straight business, not holding any punches, and really just talking 100% business to get the deal done, opposed to listen to this song and I want to wear this and I think I should be this. That's not the conversation. The conversation is usually around how much, how many people, for how long, what's your expenses, what can you do, and I need some type of, it has nothing, unfortunately, to do with the art of it. It all has to do with everybody's making money, and that's what's important. So, yeah.
Thank you. Before I go on to my next question, Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, first, I agree with a lot of what he said. There's one thing that's different depending on where you're at in your career. And if you've got a certain degree of popularity, I say you got to have an exclusive relationship. If you've got that relationship with an agency, some people, and this happened more in earlier days than now, but certain artists would think, yeah, I'm listed by 5 different agencies. I've got 5 times as many opportunities. Well, it's really a disaster, because if more than one agent is dealing with venue, then they're probably quoting slightly different prices. And so the price they're going to go with, or the agent they're going to go with, is the one that's quoting the lower price. And the artist gets hurt in the end, because they get the lowest price from the promoter, because somebody was trying to undercut the other agent. And there's other problems as to somebody is working on a show and simultaneously another agent is working on a show, and you go to confirm the show that you've been working on and somebody else has already booked it. It should all be under one roof, and management, I don't think that ever happens really. You've got one manager, but agency wise, that was a trick. And I think you've got to remember, and I've run into the situation that Lou brought up about artists having a hard time letting go of what they've been doing directly when they sign with an agency. And you got to do it, because they may be, I've done it with New Orleans artists, as a matter of fact, where they don't want to give that up. They don't want to give up New Orleans. They live there, and they've got the relationships, but we've been able to increase the pay for artists a lot of the time by separating the artist from it. And it's not that buddy, you'll do this for me, right? It's no, this is what they're worth. This is what they should get, and it's good for an artist to be separated from the business a lot of the time. They can direct it with their agent, with their manager. They can give as much information as to what does and doesn't work, but there's an advantage to having a buffer in between. So they're not taken advantage of by their friend who's always gotten a better deal because of their friendship. And you're not taking advantage of the club. You want to get what the artist deserves. So that's important, I think.
To that point, when you were talking about some of your musical acts touring in Europe or in other parts of the world, were you booking those tours, or did you work directly with an international touring agent? How important is it for artists to have an international touring agent if they're booking agent, domestic booking agent isn't booking them internationally?
I booked everywhere but Antarctica, actually, and
Oh,
toured
hey
actually.
there.
I worked with the Sierra Leone's Refugee All-Stars that formed in a refugee camp after fleeing civil war in Sierra Leone. And I went to 5 continents in 1 year with them, actually, because I was managing them as well. So we booked everywhere. There was times when there'd be a good, France in particular had a tricky thing with people outside the country booking inside the country. And so we would work frequently with a promoter who handled one country, but we would book everything around it. We'd still have to make the deals with and accept or decline the offers coming in from that agent in that country. But we booked everywhere. And I also, as a manager, I, it's typical. I think a lot of people don't look beyond the United States. And I just always felt spread as wide a net as possible of where you are touring, and you never know where you might be popular. I mean, with Robert Cray, we got double platinum in New Zealand while we're getting platinum in the rest of the world. Things like that, you just never know. So you try everything, see where some people will say stick with your strong markets, but then you'll never build a weak market. I try to build everywhere. But the other thing I did was as a manager, working with Robert Cray at Mercury Records, for instance, they have, offices around the world. And I'm sure most of the artists might not even ask how we're doing in these other countries. But I was calling the countries directly and maybe irritating the guy who did international in New York, but I would find out Germany is doing a special promotion that might really help the album. And so I tell people in all the other markets that we sent out weekly updates. As I found out just within a New York office, we talk about some great news with the artist, and I find out later the person in the next cubicle wasn't even aware of it. So we started sending updates as to what's going on with the artist, not only to various different departments in the main office, but to various different places around the world. I see I watched Amazon charts in different parts of the world, and I saw Robert Cray's record jumping up all of a sudden. I checked it out, and it turns out he'd gotten a 4-star review in the Sunday Times in London. So go into my office and put together a press release along with that, and send it out everywhere. This is what's happening here. This record has value, and it's responding. People are responding to it. So what can you do in your market? So.
I'm glad you brought up the press, because that's going to be my next question. But before I get to that, Lou, do you have any experience with an international touring and agents outside of the U.S., working with agents outside the U.S.? Because I know a lot of the bands here do work with specific touring agents in Europe.
Yeah. Honestly, you mean New Orleans, from New Orleans' point of view? All of our, unfortunately, uh, our local agents are very much so like one sound, and we kind of fit into that market somewhat, but not perfectly. When we've been able to go overseas, it's been literally through an agent from Atlanta and one from Germany. So that ironically got wind of us via social media. So, and look, Waterseed doesn't have an extensive overseas history. I think we just did, we've done Canada, we've done Russia, we're working on Germany now, and a few other places. For us, where we are in our career, we're untapped, and I mean, we have a lot of responses and a lot of people that follow us from France and from the UK. We're somewhat untapped there. We've never landed. One of our goals this year is to meet both of those markets, and I love the idea of what Mike is saying. Our popularity, and I don't mind saying this, we're not massively popular in the city of New Orleans, like some of our counterparts are. But in other parts of the country, we have a really strong fan base, and we wouldn't have known that had we not ventured out. Prior to COVID, we played a Tuesday night show every week on Frenchman, but we were touring most of the other time, and we were just conveniently like, okay, we'll use this residency as a rehearsal. But as artists come up, it's 100% true. You have to kind of, just because you're here in the city of New Orleans doesn't mean that's going to be your big money maker. Doesn't mean you're going to make the most money here. Kind of go venture to places outside, and you'll find that all the depression that you've been under, all I'm not good enough, all of the, oh, no one listens to me, no one hears me, I can't get any gigs. When you start finding other cities that are like, we love you, please come back as much as possible, it really does keep you going. So as a musician, you really want to figure that out, and also have people on your team. I want to keep tying this back into our management situation. Put people on your team that understand that. And it's not that New Orleans, the people in New Orleans have a small view of what it means to get outside of New Orleans. I think it just comes down to dollars and cents, and that New Orleans, in a weird way, is its own musical genre. And the agents, the top agents that are getting their artists around the world, specialize in that genre. And that's all I'm saying. So, us who we're kind of like far left from the genre of New Orleans, it's always been challenging in New Orleans to find the right people to get that. And that's what has a lot to do why we're self-managed. But I love the city. I feel like it's the best city to get an amazing band, in my opinion. To get an amazing band and be able to perform amazingly is no better place to cut your teeth. And I've lived in a few different cities than the competition that you're going to face in this city musically in New Orleans. So we basically stew the gumbo here, get it real tasty, and we're selling it other places. And it is what it is. So yeah.
So going back to media, Mike, tell me about the importance of having good contacts and relationships with traditional media outlets like radio, and how that impacts the ability for musicians to secure better gigs.
Well, it's huge. You can do a great set at a club in New Orleans and get 400 people standing ovation and a wonderful response. But who else knows about it besides those people and the people they talk to about it? If you're on radio, or which used to be a less complex situation in the past, where there was one station in each major city focusing on a certain type of music, basically. And if you get that whole collection of them, you're in big time. But if that was the case, and it's not really right now, but there's similarities. There's the 400 people who are raving about you in New Orleans, but you can be getting airplay and appreciation around the country and around the world with a successful radio song, and similarly with print media, where, suddenly you're being read by people all over the country or all over the world in much larger numbers than any individual venue that you can play. So it's huge. And on that point, the publicist is huge, and publicists are frequently centered on certain genres, or a lot of them are. One of my favorites was Surefire out of New York, and they handled, the Grammy nominations come out, or even the wins, and they say 27 of our artists won Grammys last night or something. They're big, but they're not too big. I've gone to them after having worked with them on a number of projects. I've gone to them with certain projects, and they were honest enough to say, we're not going to be able to do much with this, save your money, instead of just taking the money and not delivering. So that's a good, honest organization. And I always appreciated them. But there's other people that won't say that, and you've got to, once again, ask questions. When you're talking about a manager or an agent, if a new artist, if you have the ability to reach out or catch somebody at a gig and ask that artist who's managed or booked by somebody how they feel about what their experience has been. I actually worked with an artist who signed with the manager and then called up his good friend who had been with the manager and said, "Hey, I'm on your same team now." And he said, "Oh, you should have called me first. I just left them, you know, they're no good." So ask questions, ask questions, ask questions, and get background and personal knowledge of the steps you're going to take. Um, and find out. Now it's much more easier to find out who's involved. You can go onto an artist's website and see who their manager is, who their agency is, who their publicist is, maybe. And if you're looking for one of those art or types of representatives, um, find somebody who's similar to you, maybe, and see who, and they're successful, who's behind them. But don't limit yourself that way. There's other people that may not have a roster full of the type of music you're doing, but they may be up for it. I ended up having too many blues artists, I think. So I'd have talked to a festival, and I've got 3 white rock guitar blues artists, and they're all competing with each other on a festival that doesn't want 3 of those, you know. It's good to have, for an art agency to have some variety at least, you know, not internal competition. Um, but I think just going back to Lou for a second about Europe and everything, the trick you have, I think, is the number of people in the group and the amount of expenses traveling to Europe. You can't just go in on a low level, but festivals is your key, you know, getting on festivals and then your challenge is, if you're getting festivals on the weekend, is filling the dates between on the weeknights. But if you can afford to do it, if you can find a way to afford to do it, I think your band will do well there, Ashley. I think it
That was
fits
going to be
really.
my next question, so I'm glad you brought up festivals because it's important to have good relationships with the talent agents from these various festivals because they're like
Yeah.
their own islands, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's tricky because everybody wants the festivals. They know they're the bigger money. Plus, you're reaching an audience that may not come to your own individual show. They came for the festival overall or several other artists on the festival, and you're reaching a new audience. And if you can impress them, then you're building your own following. So everybody wants them, but you know, so nurse those opportunities if you have them, relationships, and but I did it with like Los Lobos years ago. That got us to Europe, you know, with that band. Then we'd have to fill in the days in between, and little by little built a strong following for them there as well as in the United States, other places.
Absolutely. Lou, what's your experience dealing with a traditional media outlets, not just social media? Do you have good relationships? I know you do with WWOZ, and I'm sure you do beyond that. How's that been impactful, or has it? And
Yeah, I mean, media changes quite a bit. You know, one of our largest markets is Pittsburgh, and I tell people that all the time. And the reason it's one of our largest markets is because the DJ found us. He had a Saturday show, and he played us all the time. And so we would just, you know, we just left Pittsburgh a few weeks ago, and we just do great numbers there. That media outlet really does help with everything we do. And I have this conversation internally all the time with the team that kind of they'll bash radio all this. Man, radio is just like, man, look, you get in rotation on a radio, people are still listening to radio. As far as the other forms of media, they're helpful, especially if you're on the road, you're doing what you need to do, and you like do a TV interview before the show that you're doing later that night. You're lining up interviews, you're getting your press happening, you're getting reviews happening from reputable magazines and outlets and publisher. All of this helps kind of build your credentials in your resume. So if you are looking for that manager, you are looking for you know, a way to get ahead, these are kind of like credentials. You know, a lot in music has to deal with validation. So you have to have credible people validating you, and that's from the way you go to the show, to the way you leave the way you perform. Your reputation is crucially important. Your show has to be consistent. It's super important. With goodness, with all the changes Waterseed has been through, we've learned consistency, you know, in our show. And, you know, one thing people say, super high energy show, it's always going to be exciting. That's something that we have to do consistently, because media is coming and they're looking and they want to know what makes you special, what's going to make you do different things. When you talk about social media, it's always tricky for me. I have an artist right now that's signed to a pretty massive uh, distribution deal that's kind of like functioning as a record label. Uh, and the main thing they're super excited about is not even his streams. They're consistently talking about the fact that 80,000 people a day use his music on TikTok. That's what excites them. That's what's exciting. And it doesn't generate any real income for him or for us, but it's why they're putting extra, 5, 6 team members on his in his little dot on his docket to work, an album. And so it's consistently changing, all the time. Social media is super tricky. And there's ways to monetize it and make money off it, but it's very different. It's very different. So I know for us personally, if we're talking about Water Seed, like we've just brought on a social media specialist, to help out. And because even in our scheme of things, it's an area that we're growing in, and consistently working on. And to be honest, if I wasn't a musician, I probably would not be on social media at all, so but it's a part of the business now. And I'll say this from an artist slash business point of view. With our new album that's coming out, several major record labels have listened to it and said, this is great, this is a great product, you guys can play, you can write, you can do all of these things. And they go to our social media and they're like, oh, but this is going to be a lot of work. This is going to be a lot of work. Yeah, 14,000 here, roughly 10,000 there. YouTube, roughly 2,000. But they want the people that have that impact of 100,000 and all the rest of this. So it comes down to, and that's something that you can't prepare for. Most artists are not good at it. Most artists are horrible at it.
But does it helps attract folks like talent agents at festivals, right? When they see those numbers.
It does, but
And
the yes, it's not a bad thing. It helps if you have it, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that people are going to come to your show, and they know that. People
right.
who are booking know that, but at least it shows that, oh, you're doing something. You're pushing in some kind of way. You have some kind of energy. You're not just putting out music and dreaming and hoping that people listen to it. You're being a mouthpiece for yourself. You're doing things. And also as artists, learn to direct people who may say, well, your streams are down. Like somebody could say, your streams are down, Lou. It's like, yeah, but have you gone to YouTube? We're up 300%. Have you gone to Instagram? We're up, 30%. Have you gone? So our fans are interacting with us in different ways. So as in today's modern industry, you have to have that, because most people are going to go to Apple Music, go to Spotify to follow you. But then if they really want to become your super fans, they're going to find you on social media. And that's what it's how much impact do you have and what does your fan base look like? That's what the social media aspect, I'm speculating, says to someone who is either a record label or a booking agent or someone like that. It's just those extra positive numbers when you're negotiating.
Well, speaking of negotiating, Bree, do you want to dive into some of the pitfalls to avoid, or identify some of the issues that are common that arise in connection with people using content on social media, even if they think it's theirs?
Oh God, fair use, Ashlye? Are you really asking about fair use?
Fair use, right, of publicity, using, making sure that whatever content that you're using is clear. I have musicians all the time that, are posting to YouTube, and, they don't necessarily have the proper clearances because that's a sync license, right?
Right.
There's a lot involved.
Sure. So if you want to be able to put your stuff on YouTube, you need to make sure that your clearances for your own music are done and done correctly. If you have used any kind of sample, you need to have a license for that sample. YouTube is the best at not understanding fair use, not believing in fair use, but having really, really good robots that scroll through everything you upload to YouTube. And if it has anything that's already copyrightable, you're going to take it down. So you're not going to be able to promote your new song if you don't have the sample correct. Also, once that song starts making money, that artist you sampled is going to come and take all of your money. Ask Puff Daddy and the police for, it's, you have to have all of your, before you have published your music, you need to have all of your clearances done correctly. You don't have any negotiating power if you haven't done it up front. Lou can also speak to this, but if you are trying to license a well-known popular song and you wait, you've already recorded it, it's already been perfected, you have a release date, you're gonna, like, you've done publicity, a new album's coming out in 3 weeks, and you haven't already gotten your clearances. If I'm the attorney for that artist, the famous artist that you're sampling, I don't have to work with you at all. I have you over a barrel. You're going to pay me whatever I want you to pay me because there's nothing you can do. Because if I say no, that whole album that you've already finalized, that you've got, like, CDs are printed, vinyl's made, like, I can just kill the entire thing. So, going in willy nilly is a bad idea. It's also very costly.
Right.
What
So there's a lot of different pitfalls when you're using other people's work.
what
Lou.
what I'll add to that, and look, I'm fighting this. I'm always fighting in this area. Look, there's I'm dealing with right now, like literally, and I just checked it. Copyright and protect your stuff. And there's a song that's super viral on TikTok right now. Earlier in the week, it was at 80,000 times it was used on TikTok videos. Now it's at 130,000 times this song has been used on TikTok, and it's going crazy. It's completely viral, and it's complicated. But how it happened is, and this is where you have to have your team together, is that someone did copyright infringement on an artist I represent and recorded something that was not his. A DJ from somewhere scraped that and then made something else from it. And that's what's going viral. So I have to go through like 3 levels of like, this guy took this from here. And so we're going through the process now. But the good thing is, the artist that I represent, he owns it. He already owns it. It's documented. He has paperwork. He has everything. So is the process is going to be simple. We have the upper hand in the situation, but it's the more you're protected, the more you take care of your stuff. Look, the internet is wild. Social media is wild, and if you're talking about protecting your intellectual property, please do the minimum to at least make sure you're protected. Because if my artist had not done that, we would just be sitting here like, hey, your whole melody words, this guy used it, then this other guy took his version and made another version, and we would just be in a bad place. But thankfully, we're in a good place where we're not going to go and destroy anybody's career, but we are going to say, hey, look, we need to get some paperwork between us because we have to start collecting our money on it. And like, but we're giving them the numbers we want. A team helps with that. Get a team that understands that and is kind of hip with all of that stuff. Yeah.
Ashley, make a point on that real quick. It's like, just to elaborate in terms of the team and the way it works, and also attorneys. So in Beyonce's formation, allegedly her producer sampled from Messy Maya, a New Orleans bounce artist. Messy Maya's estate then sued Beyonce in federal court in New Orleans. A lot of that's confidential, but what we know is that there was a recording contract between Beyonce and the producer, and in it, the producer represents and warrants that they have attained copyright clearance and license to use any samples added in. So Beyonce was dismissed from the lawsuit, but it's my understanding that the producer is still on the hook for copyright infringement of Messy Maya's estate for not getting proper clearance. But Beyonce, as the artist, still got brought into that lawsuit. And that was, I'm sure, very expensive. So again, make sure your contracts with your key members are in place, because when somebody gets sued, everybody's going to get sued.
Right. And I think that's important to make sure you vet your producers, right? Because this is something that comes up often. And, if you end up, illegally sampling someone's work because your producer didn't clear the sample, then you are on the hook. You are on the hook. Your recourse is against the producer. So you definitely want to vet the folks you're working with. So
So
I'm
keep
gonna,
track, not just the samples you're putting in, but keep track of the samples that the producer's putting in. There needs to be a list of the samples, because
right.
the samples that you use in the first couple of versions of the song might not be the ones you use at the end. And then if you don't really know what version or what song you sampled, your life's going to be really complicated. And as an attorney who does get to pick my clients, I'm not going to want to get involved in that can of worms.
So shifting back, I want to ask Mike one more question. I want to hone in on the festivals, and on the buyers. And then we're going to shift to questions from the audience. So if you all want, you can put your questions in chat, but you can also do the hand raise thing. So get ready for that if you want to start populating the chat with questions, you're free to do that as well. But Mike, just circling back on festivals, what is the best way for emerging artists to establish relationships with the talent buyers?
No doubt it's hard when you're not known. It's extremely difficult. You've got to just somehow connect with them with your best work, like Lou was saying, which is kind of what I was saying too, is that what you're doing has to stand out, and especially in a festival situation. What are you doing? First of all, just in a really short capsule, I think an artist needs to do everything they can to increase positive awareness to the degree that people will spend the time or the money on their product versus anybody else's product, whether that's coming to a show or buying merchandise or CD or whatever. So everything does count for some of the things mentioned that are not automatic keys to success. I think it all counts. And even a small crowd when you're playing live, you never know who's in the crowd. It may be the nephew of the president of Warner Brothers or something like that, who ends up going and saying, I saw the greatest band. So I think people should always do the best show they possibly can. So again, for festivals, it's first of all, festivals generally have a specific realm that they deal with. So don't chase first the ones that make sense for what you're doing. And if there's any way, knowing somebody who knows somebody there to get through them, like everything else, but especially festivals, people are bombarded by options, and they'll pick first of all the one that's going to draw the best and keep their festival in business, then their personal favorites, and maybe mixing in some new discoveries. So you want to be one of those new discoveries if you're haven't made a name yet. And so put your very best foot forward, and don't just send a promotional packages of some sort or an EPK or whatever, but follow up. Definitely follow up as much as you can, and make the follow up as easy as possible. Like, I sent you this package. If I could just have a few minutes of your time, or whatever the case might be. And which brings up another point, is make dealing with you a positive experience that people want to repeat. They're open to repeating. If you're a pain in the tail in any kind of way, besides standing up for your own rights, there's too many options out there for promoters and record companies to deal with anything that sounds like it might be a hassle. So make dealing with you a pleasure. But anyway, festivals, everybody wants them because they're that, like I said before, you're reaching an audience that would not have come for you necessarily. Great opportunity for building an audience. Plus, the money is generally better because they need you on these dates, not whenever you happen to be passing through town. So they're the most valuable. I don't know that there's a magic button. You do whatever you possibly can to get in their head, as somebody who's a good option, maybe is that personal decision to introduce your audience to somebody new. So whatever you can do. When just jumping back for a second to Europe, I did work with an agency there for a number of my acts, and they only took the biggest ones, of course, but and they weren't an overloaded agency, but I had an opening on a John Lee Hooker tour of Europe, and I know that there was this festival in Switzerland that was on that weekend. And I said, have you checked that? And they hadn't. We got $60,000 for that day that was being overlooked, So I took everything back in-house again, and, just because nobody cared about the artist more than we did. Again, you've got to have the cheerleaders. Sorry to tangent off there, but
No, I think that's a good way to circle back. And I'm curious if anyone, if the three of you have any final thoughts. Is there an obvious team member that we've overlooked that we haven't talked about today? If not, then we can open the floor to questions, but please.
just one other point too, what something Lou was saying about, I forget exactly how it came up, but it sparked a thought in my mind about New Orleans artists. New Orleans has always had the best music, and they're better at the business now than they were, but it's been weaker in the business side and stronger in the music side. But so if somebody's trying to get out of New Orleans, don't fall for the concern that, yeah, but we make $500 a night in New Orleans, and we're not getting offered that much for the place 100 miles away. Well, no, because you're not as well known there, and it's going to cost you more to get there. But are you interested in spreading your wings and getting into other markets? There's also a danger of overplaying your home market, and being taken for granted. I'm not going to come out and see so-and-so on Tuesday because I can see them next Tuesday, and they can count on seeing you other times. But ideally, if you spread yourself over a wider territory, then you're playing your home turf less often, and it becomes more of a special event that people are going to be less likely or more likely to want to go to because they're not knowing that you're going to see you the next week. So I think that's important for people in New Orleans or anywhere. I represented a band that came out of the Northeast, and they built themselves up there really well. So they're getting $5,000 a night, plus you have to supply a grand piano. Well, then I tried to tour them across the country, and most of the country, their value wasn't significant enough to even pay for the piano, much less the band. So, but if they spread themselves out across the country and then built simultaneously, then you don't get in that situation where you've built up so many expenses, you're limited to where you can tour. You can't tour that much. So, anyway, just a couple points.
That's really great insight. Thank you. To Lou and Bree, do you all have anything else you want to chime in on before I open the floor?
I would just.
Oh, go ahead, Lou.
No, you got it, Bree.
Okay, if you do, Lou and I really like. It's my fault. We're taking a sabbatical on Crescendo this year, but next year, please come. And we want you to learn how to do these things yourselves. We can't stress that enough. That's the only way you're going to know if anything's being done right, if you've done it yourself. But we understand you might, if you work with family, if you work with friends, if your cousin's doing your Instagram account, fine. That might be where you are right now. But just do everybody a favor and put some kind of expectations in writing. Like how many times they have to do, like post to social media for you. Do something, put it down in writing. Working with family and friends is really, really complicated. So still treat that like a business because otherwise Christmas is going to be really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Thank you, Bree. Lou, do you have any?
Yeah, number one, I don't work with family and friends because I care for them too much. And the person I have to be to get things that I need to get done. I have no desire for my family and friends to be exposed to that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to what Mike was saying. We just did a pretty cool tour in the Northeast where we'd only played once, and that was maybe 6 years ago. It's a pretty big tour. One of my favorite bands, Living Color, was the headline, so we got to hang out with them. And look, the promoter paid us maybe 1/3 of what we're accustomed to making. Like 1/3. They say, we'll pay for your lodging, your flight, but this is all we can afford, right now. And I was like, we said, cool, we did it, but we did it because their point was quite obvious. It's like, no, you don't play the Northeast that much at all. I'm like, you're right. So from their perspective, we would not be the ticket selling artist on the bill. Fair enough. Again, as an artist, I'm like, whatever, we can do it. But as a business guy, I'm just like, okay, fair enough. But here's the thing: we went and did the show, and I put an Instagram post up. We were the opener, like, of the show, and there's like 4 bands on the show. We were the opener. I can't tell you the last time we opened in that position, but this is the thing that we like sold out of all of our vinyl. We sold out of all of our comic books. We almost sold out of t-shirts. And the part we made all the money back that we were looking for from getting just paid directly. We made it back, but it was better. And I always say this when you sell merch. Selling merch is super powerful because not only are you making money, but the person is putting you in their pocket and they're taking you with them to experience you later. And that's building your fan base. The t-shirts, they're advertising for you. So for us, it was a win-win for us in that, but that also goes to, we performed those shows like we were the headliner, and that's what made a difference. And people loved it enough that they came and supported us. I mean, it was great because we were able to hang out at our merch table while the other bands were on. So we got the maximum amount of merch table time to talk to fans, to, build those relationships. So, no matter what degree you're on in this, and what Mike has been saying a lot, is there's ups and downs. You have to go into every market realistically and say, hey, I'm going to make the best of it and build it. And so we'll be back. And that's as simple as that. So think about it that way.
Well, and Lou, I love what you just said because I think it's implied, but your fans are part of your team, right? I mean,
So, yeah.
always the largest part of your team. And interfacing with them is extremely important these days because there is that expectation.
Look, the best advertisement for us has always been when we're on the road, has been that person that saw us in New Orleans and they brought 4 friends when we landed in their hometown. It's been that person that's locally, 2 people out of the group of 8 are huge fans and they made their other 6 friends come to the show. That's been the word of mouth. Is still, you can't beat it. Word of mouth, and you special to somebody, and you artists should at all times be making a connection, because your biggest, what's going to make everything else click are those super fans that remember how you made them feel, or that very nice hello, how are you, what's your name, can I sign something for you, can those people become your super fans, and they're going to be with you forever. And the great thing about it that people don't realize is those are the fans that want to see you win. They want to see you win, so they'll go through you with your bumps and bruises and your mistakes. They'll take the whole ride with you because they want to brag and say, I remember when I saw them with only 20 people, now it's 20,000 people. And those are the people that you need to be cultivating. You need to, at all points in time, stay super connected to the people that are coming to see you.
Fantastic. All right. So I think we should open up the floor for questions. Does anyone have any questions?
No
I don't
question.
have any in the chat.
None. Nobody. Everybody's shy today. Okay.
You covered everything you need to know about the music business, so nothing
Great.
to ask.
Bree,
No.
this is so unusual.
On that note, there is a book, Everything You Need to Know About the Music Industry by Don Passman, who is an attorney. And you can usually buy, like, not the current edition, but the edition before it. And it really does tell you everything you need to know about the music industry. So if you're looking to just get your feet wet and learn some things, there are a lot of books and resources, blogs out there that can help you do that.
Thank you. Mike, do you have any other suggestions on resources or places?
That's the one I would have mentioned as well. That's a great book. And I think some of the quotes, at least on earlier editions, were from record company reps saying, "You gave away all the secrets. You told them everything, you know." But that's a good thing for somebody learning. I would make one more point that has been touched on. I touched on it myself, and Lou did as well, about family and friends. You know, you have in the beginning, it's maybe all you've got to help you out doing certain little tasks and everything, but it's not a wise thing in the long run. You go to a record company and your family member is representing you, they're not going to believe anything you say because you have no credibility as an objective source. You know, of course, you think your father or your daughter or whoever is the best, and they all know that that's what you're thinking. Much better to have somebody coming in who they've maybe worked with before, or they know about this manager's experience and that they've done good things in the past and they represent legitimate artists. But there's no credibility. I mean, maybe saves money for the artist getting the friend or the family to represent it. But it's really, I've only seen one instance where that was a good one, and that was Michelle Indighiacella's wife, who came out of the Gap as an executive of the Gap, and she was open-minded. Not a lot of the time people think they know it all, and this is a simple business, but she was open to what do I need to do and how should I do this and that. And she was effective and knowledgeable, not so much about the music business, but she learned that. And she asked questions, which is what I was thinking was my theme for this whole thing, you know, is ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you pretend like you know it all, it's not going to work.
Well, and to that point, if you all do have questions that you don't want to ask right now or that, come to you later, as is often the case, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be able to field them and get some answers for you. Okay, it looks like there is one question.
Just a comment.
Oh, it's a comment? Okay, great. Okay.
I would add one resource, Hypebot is a great email list that they do daily updates on the music business and how it's moving, and they stay pretty up to date, like with things that happen within 24 hours. And it's just a newsletter that comes out. Yep, it comes out. It came out today. Another one came out, but it comes out every day, and it deals literally with how the industry's changing. They give a ton of information on what's happening in the music industry, but they also talk to people who are in the industry who do like little blog posts about how to deal with things. What was the topic today? Was reunion tours, effect on music streaming. So they just talk about all kinds of things. So yeah, and it's usually about 6 topics every day that they'll deal with.
Great. Thank you, Lou.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd like to thank all three of you for being here today, and thanks to the audience for joining us. Like I said, if you need if you have follow-up questions or if you need our services, our website is ellanola.org. Feel free to reach out, and thanks again for attending today.
One quick thing is Ella, is that available for people outside Louisiana to join?
It's complicated because I'm licensed in Louisiana. So there are some instances where, we can take a federal issue if it's something that, falls within my licensure. But for the most part, we're working with New Orleans and Louisiana artists.
Okay.
But there are exceptions, it's just not the rule. So
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Oh,
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay. Thank you.